Thank you for joining us today for the 2018 CTAS application, Purpose Area 1 COPS Office Budget Worksheet Completion Webinar. My name is Bill Faith and I am Staff Accountant with the COPS Office. There are two types of awards available through Purpose Area 1, the COPS Office Tribal Resources Grant Program. They are Tribal Hiring Awards and Tribal Equipment and Training Awards. The key goals of this webinar are to provide an overview of completing the budget worksheet for Purpose Area 1 in the CTAS application process, identify tools and resources for applicants that will facilitate the application process, and provide an opportunity for applicants to ask CTAS-related questions. Here is a slide that you will find award funding amount and application submission deadline information on. The solicitation is now open and will close at 9 p.m. Eastern Time on March 20th. The current slide is showing a list of reference materials that will prove to be valuable to you as you work your way through the application and budget. The 5 listed here are particularly important for requesting funds through Purpose Area 1. Please download the 2018 CTAS solicitation by going to this link. Please review the entire solicitation, then proceed to the following information. Chapter D, what an application should include. Section D, Budget Detail Worksheet, Budget Narrative, and Demographic Form, beginning on page 8. You will be able to download the Budget Detail Workbook using the link shown above. We are now ready to jump into the Budget Detail Workbook. I will be providing tips and examples as we work our way through the budget. Please enter your questions into the appropriate chat box so they can be addressed after the presentation. This slide shows a chart of the available Budget Detail Workbook categories for Purpose Area 1. There are 9 categories on the CTAS Application Budget Detail Workbook. However, the COPS Office uses only 8 of the categories as construction is not allowable under Purpose Area 1. A few overview tips. Download and use the Budget Detail Worksheet and Demographic Form. Download and refer to the COPS Office Purpose Area 1 allowable cost lists while preparing the worksheet. Some resource materials have been updated recently. Provide an item narrative description for each line item requested, which is new for this year. Understand the program goals and eligibility requirements as listed on page 19 of the solicitation. Understand the meaning of supplanting. The Purpose Area 1 CTAS Budget Detail Worksheet was redesigned to be more user-friendly and to reflect software updates. Most notably, you will find more instructional language throughout the worksheet. Just look for the little red triangles and hover your mouse pointer over top of the triangle. There are numerous areas on the budget worksheet that have helpful information at your fingertips. You are strongly encouraged to use the workbook when completing your proposed budgets. Here is an image of where the little red triangles are located. When you hover your mouse over the pointer over the triangle, you will see a dialog box just like the one on the screen. The Budget Detail Worksheet should provide a detailed computation for each budget line item requested, listing the total cost of each line item and showing how it was calculated by the applicant. New for this year, you are required to provide a brief description in the box labeled Item Narrative for each and every line item that you request. If you need more room, use the narrative box at the bottom of each category. The Budget Detail Worksheet should present a complete itemization of all the proposed costs. There should be a clear link between the activities proposed and the items included in the budget. Supplanting. Generally, DOJ funds must be used to supplement existing funds for program activities and may not replace or supplant non-federal funds that have been appropriated for the same purpose. Grant funds must be used to increase the amount of state, local, tribal, or BIA funds that otherwise would be budgeted for these purposes in the absence of DOJ award funding. For additional guidance regarding supplanting, including DOJ program-specific examples, refer to the Coordinated Travel Assistance Solicitation Guidance regarding supplanting FAQs at the link listed. The personnel category allows you to request funding for the following positions: sworn law enforcement officer and/or civilian methamphetamine coordinator. Utilize the reference materials available to you to determine specific eligibility requirements for each. All newly hired or rehired officers funded under Purpose Area 1 must engage in community policing activities. Salaries and fringe benefits for the methamphetamine coordinator may be requested specifically to address methamphetamine issues within the tribe. This is the only civilian position available. Applicants requesting funding for hiring must plan to retain grant-hired officers for 12 months after the expiration of the grant. The retention requirement does not apply to the civilian methamphetamine coordinator position. Purpose Area 1 Budget Worksheet will assist your law enforcement agency in reporting your agency's current entry-level salary and benefits and identifying the total salary and benefits request per officer position for the length of the grant term. List the current entry-level base salary and fringe benefits rounded to the nearest whole dollar for one full-time sworn officer position within your agency. When determining the fringe benefit costs in Section B, do not include employee contributions withholdings. List only the portion of each fringe benefit that will be contributed by the agency. The personnel section will consist of the gross salary and the entry-level officer or the meth coordinator, plus the agency portion of fringe benefit contributions. Here is an image of the personnel category. Locate the little red triangles and read the information in each of the dialog boxes. Click on the appropriate button to select either a sworn officer or a civilian position. The civilian position can only be a meth coordinator. Click inside of the boxes for name, position, and sworn officer category, and make the appropriate selection from the drop-down menus that appear. Enter number of positions requested. Enter the negotiated annual salary for an entry-level officer in Year 1 with reasonable anticipated increases in Year 2 and Year 3. The annual salary for a methamphetamine coordinator should be reasonable based on Department of Labor standards. Here is an image of the fringe benefits category. Again, locate the red triangles and read the information in each of the dialog boxes. Costs for applicable line items are entered based on the percentage of the cost for each item. Calculations are based on the amounts listed for entry-level salary per year, as shown on the previous slide. Enter the appropriate percentage in the column labeled Rate for the appropriate year. Review the next slide for comments regarding vacation and sick leave. Use the Other Costs line item to enter the cost of benefits that are allowable, but not listed above. If there are multiple items, combine the total here. Use the Personnel and Fringe Benefits narrative section at the bottom of this category to provide greater detail for the items listed above and to separately explain each of the items listed on the Other Costs line item. You must answer the two questions at the top of the fringe benefits chart. Yes means that you allow vacation and sick leave time to be accrued as part of your salary. If you answer yes, do not enter a separate amount on the line items for vacation or sick leave. Fringe benefits should be based on actual known costs or an approved negotiated rate by a federal agency. If not based on an approved negotiated rate, list the composition of the fringe benefit package by individual line items. Fringe benefits are for the personnel listed in the budget category, Category A, and should be reflective of the benefits that all other employees of the agency receive. All requested information must be included in the budget detail worksheet and supported by greater details in the budget narrative section. Travel and training. For training, law enforcement training such as basic, comprehensive, or specialized police training at a state academy or the Indian Police Academy in Artesia, New Mexico, as well as community policing, computer and crime reporting training, to include anti-methamphetamine and human trafficking training. For travel, transportation, lodging, and per diem reimbursement for meeting or training costs related to purpose area activities, including costs associated with any DOJ-required training and anti-methamphetamine training. Purpose area number 1 applicants must request travel costs for attendance at the DOJ CTAS new grantee orientation session for 2 staff. For budgeting purposes, please use Washington, D.C. as the location for this training. Visit the GSA website for determining allowable per diem travel costs. Refer to the COPS office Purpose Area 1 allowable cost list for guidance for this section. Here is an image of the travel and training category. Locate the red triangles and read the information in each of the dialog boxes. This slide shows an example request for attending the required DOJ CTAS new grantee orientation session. This can be used as a template for other training requests as well. As you see, categories are filled in for you and they are used as examples. Click on the appropriate button to add or delete a travel training request. Enter the name of the training course and the location of travel, if known, or if unknown, indicate location to be determined. Enter a brief description of this item in the box labeled Item Narrative. Use the narrative section at the bottom of the category to provide greater detail for each training event, project objectives, and basis of computation. You will see an example of that on the previous slide in the narrative section. For each type of expense, enter the total cost per individual in the column labeled Cost per Staff. These totals will be multiplied by the number of travelers shown in the number staff column to determine the total cost for each expense type. Identify the travel regulations that your agency follows, either your own or federal, which is GSA. If none is identified, then we will treat it as federal. Add all transportation costs together. That would be airfare, taxi, shuttle, mileage, parking, tolls, etc. Any costs that are appropriate for transportation should be added together to put on the category. If a specific item will be shared, for example, a taxi ride or a hotel room, be sure to divide that specific cost between the number of staff involved and add the separated totals to each appropriate expense type per staff. Be sure to request the appropriate number of nights for lodging. If your trip is 4 days, you will receive 4 days of per diem, but you will only need 3 nights of lodging. When you follow the GSA federal travel rates, be sure to limit your per diem costs to 75% full day total for each travel day. That would be the first day and the last day of your trip. Note, travel expenses for consultants should be included in the consultant travel data fields under the subaward, subgrants, and procurement contracts category. Equipment. Law enforcement equipment can include bulletproof vests, basic issue equipment, police vehicles such as police cars, SUVs, ATVs, boats, as needed for law enforcement purposes and anti-methamphetamine activities. Technology such as computer hardware, software, mobile data terminals, narrowband radio upgrades, and dispatch and communication systems. Applicants who do not already have an information gathering system compatible with the FBI Uniform Crime Reporting System are encouraged to apply for funds to pay for National Incident-Based Reporting System, UCR compliant data systems. When purchasing communications and/or data systems, please identify the method of procurement and enter your request in the appropriate category. Refer to the DOJ Financial Guide for more information on procurement. Here is an image of the equipment category. Locate the red triangles and read the information in each of the dialog boxes. To enter your requested items into this category, click on the appropriate button to add equipment, or if you want to take one off, delete a request. Enter the equipment cost accordingly for each line item selected. Enter a brief item narrative for each and every line item requested. Enter the quantity for each item and the cost per unit. Repeat these steps for each item or grouped items requested. Use the narrative section at the bottom of the category to provide greater detail for each item or group of items requested. Contact the COPS office to discuss disposition of equipment. Refer to the allowable cost list for guidance on what can be requested. Where possible, group requests together on one line item. For example, when purchasing a vehicle, combine the cost of the vehicle and the cost of the patrol accessory package together. Identify the purpose of the item narrative and provide greater detail showing all costs separately in the narrative section at the bottom of the page. Attach quotes for each of the application. We will be looking for those. Whenever possible, remain generic when requesting items. If you want a Ford SUV, just list it as a patrol SUV. And if anything happens to make you change your mind about Ford, then you are not tied to one specific brand. Same goes with most items. Don't specify Motorola, just list it as radios. As always, attach the quote to the application to confirm the cost that you have listed. Indicate whether your organization will use their own written capitalization policy or the federal regulations for classification of equipment. The federal threshold for non-expendable items is defined as having a useful life of more than 1 year with a fair market value of $5,000 or more. Items that are capitalized are not generally allowable to be part of the base for determining the amount of funds recovered as indirect costs. It is suggested that you separate your requested items between equipment category and the supplies category based on whether or not they meet your capitalization policy threshold. Supplies. Expendable items costing less than $5,000 should be included in the supplies category. List items by type: standard issue apparel, uniforms, accessories, binoculars, books, handheld radios and tape recorders, etc. And show the basis for computation. Generally, supplies include any materials that are expendable or consumed during the course of the project. All requested information must be included in the budget detail worksheet, and greater detail for each item can be added in the narrative section of this category if necessary. Here is an image of the supplies category. Again, locate the red triangles and read the information in each of the dialog boxes. Click on the appropriate button to add supply or delete selected. Click in the empty box in the supply columns and then select an item from the drop-down menu that appears. If you don't see your item, simply type a separate name for the supply item being requested. Enter a brief description under item narrative and plan to provide more details in the narrative section at the end of the category. Enter the quantity in the column labeled number of items and enter the per unit cost in the column labeled cost. Construction is not applicable to COPS grants. Procurement contracts. You can see contract definition at 2 CFR Part 200.22. Provide a description of the product or service to be procured by contract and an estimate of the cost. Indicate whether the applicant's formal written procurement policy or the federal acquisition regulation is followed. Applicants are encouraged to promote free and open competition in awarding procurement contracts. A separate justification must be provided for sole source procurements in excess of the simplified acquisition threshold set in accordance with the U.S. Code currently set at $150,000. Please refer to the DoD Financial Guide for more guidance on procurement contracts. Subawards. You can also see subaward definition at 2 CFR Part 200.92. Provide a description of the federal award activities proposed to be carried out by any subrecipient and an estimate of the cost include the cost per subrecipient to the extent known prior to the application submission. For each subrecipient, enter the subrecipient entity name if known. Please indicate any subaward information included under Budget Category G Subawards, Subgrants, and Procurement Contracts by including the label Subaward with each subaward entry. Review the requirements regarding subrecipient use of indirect costs. And as always, refer to the DOJ Guide, Financial Guide for more guidance on subawards and subgrants. Here is an image of the subaward subgrant procurement contracts category. Locate the red triangles and read the information in each of the dialog boxes. Click on the appropriate button to add an item or delete selected. Enter the name of the company if known in the item column, then enter a brief description under the item narrative and plan to provide more details in the narrative section. Enter the total cost in the column labeled total cost. Include subaward label for each subaward subgrant entry. Consultant fees. For each consultant, enter the name if known, service to be provided, hourly or daily fee based on an 8-hour day, and estimate time of the project. Consultant fees in excess of the DOJ grant-making component's maximum rate for an 8-hour day, which is currently $650, requires additional justification and prior approval from the respective DOJ grant-making component. All requested information must be included in the budget detail worksheet, and greater detail may be included in the narrative section at the bottom of this category. Travel expenses for consultants should be included here in the consultant travel data field under the Subaward Subgrant Procurement Contracts category. Refer to the DOJ Financial Guide for more guidance on consultant fees. Here is an image of the consultant fees category. Locate the red triangles and read the information in each of the dialog boxes. Enter the name title of consultant, travel costs, and allowable expenses on the appropriate line items for this category. Other costs. This category is available to list any items that cannot be classified as equipment or supplies. The COPS office does pay for background checks for newly hired officers, although they are not required. Background checks are highly recommended. Agencies may request funding for overtime for sworn officers engaging in community policing related activities. We will discuss overtime further in the next few slides. All requested information must be included in the budget detail worksheet and have a brief description in the item narrative box for each item requested. Greater detail may be provided in the narrative section at the end of the category. Here is an image of the consultant fees category. I didn't change it. Here is an image of the other category. Locate the red triangles and read the information in each of the dialog boxes. To enter a request, click on the appropriate button to add other costs or delete selected. Enter the name of the item in the description column, then enter a brief explanation in the item narrative column, and plan to provide more details in the narrative section at the end of the category. Enter the total cost in the column labeled Total Cost. The following is a few pointers on overtime. Agencies may request funding for overtime for sworn officers engaging in community policing-related activities. Overtime expenses must exceed the expenditure that your agency is obligated or funded to pay in its current budget. As applied in this instance, this means that overtime grant funds must be used to increase the total amount of funds that otherwise would be made available and dedicated toward overtime. This falls in line with the planning slide that we listed earlier. Overtime can be requested as a single line item entry in the other cost category labeled overtime for the entire eligible amount of overtime that you are requesting. See question 33, how much overtime can I request? On page 27 of the frequently asked questions. Overtime costs consist of the hourly rate as determined by your agency's compensation policy, plus the amount of the agency's portion of fringe benefits applicable to the overtime hourly rate. You are limited to FICA, workers' compensation, and unemployment insurance, as described on page 27 of the frequently asked question guide. The COPS office will not pay for any other fringe benefits for requested overtime costs. If your agency pays for additional benefits for officer overtime, then your agency will be required to do so with local funds. Also keep in mind that your overtime costs may be included in the direct cost base for the purpose of recovering indirect costs. Agencies are allowed overtime in general, not tied to a specific officer request. To prevent the request from being too large, the costs will be capped based on the overall level of your sworn strength. The amounts are $25,000, $50,000, and $75,000 as described in the frequently asked questions. Indirect costs. Indirect costs are allowed only if the applicant has a current, federally approved indirect cost rate, or the applicant is eligible to use and elects to use the de minimis indirect cost rate of 10%. I will discuss both of these options in the next few slides. The term base, as listed on your indirect cost negotiation agreement, refers to the accumulated direct costs used to distribute indirect costs to individual federal awards. The direct cost base selected should result in each award bearing a fair share of the indirect costs in reasonable relation to the benefits received from those costs. The majority of tribal agreements are assigned to use the modified total direct cost distribution base, otherwise known as MTDC, which means total direct costs excluding capital expenditures and extraordinary or distorting items such as pass-through funds, major subcontractors and subawards, etc. Here is an image of the indirect cost category. Locate the red triangles and read the information in each dialog box. To enter a request, click on the appropriate button to add indirect costs or delete selected. Enter the rate type and distribution base type of the agreement in the description column. Then enter the effective period in the item narrative column and plan to provide more details in the narrative section at the end of the category. Enter the direct cost base in the column labeled base and the most current rate in the column labeled indirect cost rate. It is suggested that you please list all of the direct cost items that will not be included in the base here in the indirect cost narrative so that the total cost requested can be confirmed. An applicant with a current federally approved indirect cost rate must attach a copy of the rate approval, a fully executed signed indirect cost negotiation agreement. If the applicant does not have an approved rate, one can be requested by contacting the applicant's cognizant federal agency, which will review all documentation and approve a rate for the applicant organization, or, if the applicant's accounting system permits, costs may be allocated in the direct costs category. If the rate agreement is expired at the time of the application, then the expired rate will be used to determine the cost for this award. However, the funds will be frozen, and the recipient will be unable to recover funds budgeted for indirect costs until a current rate is approved. The recipient will need to provide the awarding office with an updated agreement in order to begin recovering funds for indirect costs. In order to use the de minimis indirect rate, an applicant would need to attach written documentation to the application that advises DOJ of both the applicant's eligibility to use the de minimis rate and its election. If the applicant elects the de minimis method, costs must be consistently charged as either indirect or direct, but may not be double charged or inconsistently charged as both. In addition, if this method is chosen, then it must be used consistently for all federal awards until such a time as the applicant entity chooses to negotiate a federally approved indirect cost rate. The direct cost base used is Modified Total Direct Cost, MTDC, which means total direct cost less capital expenditures and pass-through funds, as indicated on the previous slide. This slide shows a question regarding indirect costs that have previously been submitted. So without reading the actual question, I will give you the answer. If the rate agreement is expired at the time of application, your expired rate will be used to calculate your request for indirect costs. However, you will be unable to recover those costs until a current rate is approved. The recipient will need to provide the awarding office with an update agreement in order to begin recovering funds for indirect costs. On this slide, you will see the list of contacts for the COPS office. If you have any questions, feel free to call any one of these numbers. Again, I want you to remember the deadline for March 20th, 2018. Please do not wait till the very end to begin your submission, and don't wait till the end to actually submit. Try to make it before that date, and just in case any technical issues come up. Thank you, and at the end of our presentation today, we'll take questions now.
Hi, this is Courtney. I'm from the OJJDP Tribal Youth TTA Center. I will be reading your questions. The first question that we have states, the federal law enforcement training does not break down the basic training into hours for use of force, de-escalation of conflict, racial bias, etc. It does give total hours for basic training and what is covered. Please advise on how hours should be entered.
Any thoughts? We'll have to, if you want us to provide an answer to that, we'll have to look through that specific example when we get back to the office, and we will include it in the package that goes out to you, so the answer will be forthcoming.
Okay. Our next question, may we use CTAS funds in Purpose Area 1 to replace tribal general operating funds?
That would be a no.
Okay, the next question, can we include training in Purpose Area 1? If yes, and we have a specific training or trainer in mind, are we required to do a bidding process?
That would always be helpful in terms of getting the costs, the best cost value for your money. So please add the quote, if you will, to your application. Yes, training is included, is available on Purpose Area 1.
And your department can follow your own procurement policies. So follow your own procurement policies, but absolutely training is eligible. And if you do have a specific trainer in mind, you can just state that in your application. But we expect your department to follow your own procurement policies. And going back to Suzanne's question about the demographics form, yes, absolutely. Feel free to provide the total hours, even though it doesn't provide a breakdown. to the best of your ability, try to answer the question regarding the basic training and what is covered. And by the way, I also work with Bill at the COPS office. This is Melissa Harrington.
Okay, the next question. When requesting overtime, do we just average the officer's hourly salary and fringe?
For overtime, it's simply based on your agency's policy on how you come up with overtime hours. And like I said, there's only a couple of items in fringe that you will be reimbursed for. So keep an eye on that when the frequently asked questions will be helpful to you.
Okay, next question. How many nights do we budget for the DOJ CTAS orientation session?
Generally two-day event.
The next question. When I download the budget form and try to input a budget line item, it says, cannot run the macro. The macro may not be available in this worksheet, or all macros may be disabled. The Excel document does not give me the option to enable macros.
We recommend that you call the GMS help desk. They should help you and assist you with the technical difficulties that you might be having with the budget worksheet. The technical assistant GMS help desk, if you give me a minute, I can look in the solicitation for that number. And while I'm looking, I can answer. There was a separate question in the separate chat box about the overtime request. Bill, can you repeat the sworn force and overtime cap, please, while I look for the GMS help desk number?
Yes. That question states, can you further the overtime cap amounts?
Okay. Overtime requests are limited as follows. Sworn force of 1 to 9, no more than $25,000 in overtime costs. Sworn force of 10 to 19, no more than $50,000 in overtime costs. Sworn force of 20 or more, no more than $75,000 in overtime costs.
And regarding getting help downloading the budget worksheet, please contact the GMS support hotline at 1-888-549-9901, option 3, or via email at gmshelpdesk@usdoj.gov. Again, if anybody has any questions regarding technical difficulties with our application, please contact the GMS support hotline at 1-888-549-9901. And if you have any programmatic questions, you may contact our response center, which is 1-800-421-6770. Again, 1-800-421-6770, but that was listed on our last slide as well.
Okay, the next question. I'm having difficulty downloading the webinar slides. Will they be available for download after the webinar?
Yes. Traditionally, in about a week or so, when you register for any of our webinars, you will receive an email back with the webinar presentation and a recording of this webinar. So they will be posted in the near future.
Okay, we have another question. For sworn force, do you include both BIA and tribal officers?
Sure. You can list your current sworn force.
I think that I have read every question that I'm able to see. If anyone else has a question that you'd like to submit in the Q&A box, please do so.
And
Hi.
this was, I'm sorry, and this was a suggestion from our colleague about the difficulty downloading the webinar slides. It was recommended that if you click on the title and then click download file, that might help.
Okay, we do have another question. Purpose Area 1 is $400,000 for 3 years or $400,000 for 4 years?
Well, the sworn force is what dictates the amount, and 400 is not one of them, but the same numbers for the overtime will be 1 through 9. Your total award is capped at 300,000. For 10 through 19 sworn officers, your total award is capped at 600,000. And for 20 and over, your whole award is capped at 1 million. The amount that you request for personnel specifically is a 3-year program, and you have to meet 36 months of actual hiring. They have to be in place for 36 months. So the 4th year that you're mentioning is retention. That is with your own local funds. So if you want to consider that, it's a 4-year grant. Only 3 of those years will be used to deplete the federal share, and your 4th year will be your own local funds.
We still have a little bit of time if anyone has additional questions. Okay. Next question. In the H, other costs category narrative, do we need to break down the OT cost for each officer?
The overtime cost is one cost to be applied to the sworn officers that are engaged in community policing. The costs that go towards overtime will be calculated by you on a running basis, not to exceed the amount that you've requested. The amount you're going to list on the other cost category is simply the total that you want, up to the maximum that you're allowed to have. So you would have one line item claiming overtime for sworn officers as needed.
Okay, next question. Sworn forces can contain 1 officer paid by the BIA and or 2 officers paid by the tribe. When reporting the size of a sworn force, do we count all officers or only tribally paid officers?
I would have to say all officers. In your case, it's only going to take you from 1 to 2 or 3. And so your caps won't change any. But the fact that the funds you get from us have to add to the amount that you're getting from other places for these items. So we can consider that position already filled by you as a sworn officer.
Okay, next question. May we purchase a squad car under the equipment line item for Purpose Area 1? If yes, should we submit quotes or can we describe the quotes received in the narrative tab?
Yes, you can purchase a patrol car. You should have a quote from somewhere that you're going to actually purchase this car, and you can attach it to the application. You can describe it in detail in the narrative tab. But yes, if you could please provide the quote, and especially if you're going to have a base cost for the car and another cost for the accessory package, if you're getting that, then we'll need the quote for both if they are separate to identify the items that are going into the accessory package.
Next question. So if it takes at least 3 months before officers are on board, does that mean personnel costs will only be for 2 years and 3 quarters? But can you request an extension to expend funds?
No, the grant period is for 3 years. You can get reimbursed while the officers are in training. Can you read the last part of the question? And extensions, absolutely. The opportunity for you to request additional time down the road is available to any of our awardees in the event that you might need additional time. But the clock doesn't start, if it takes 3 months for the officers to be on board, you have a 3-year grant period and you have 3 years to draw down on the awarded funding for these officers.
Okay, next question. Can we use Purpose Area 1 funds to host community events to improve tribal police community relations? If yes, would this be categorized as other or supplies?
I guess I might need more information as to what type of funding, like what items would you consider in terms of hosting community events? I don't know. I guess I need more information from Nora on what she's envisioning in terms of improving what makes up the tribal police community relations event. I would recommend just going to our allowable, unallowable cost list and just double check to see if any of those items that you might think falls under these community events, if it's allowed or not allowed. And in my opinion, I would probably say that the materials that you might be looking for the events would fall under supplies, but I'm not 100% sure whether it goes under other or supplies. So I guess the point that I'm making is absolutely, if you're interested in doing a tribal police community relations event, you can just describe it, refer to our allowable, unallowable cost list to double check, and just itemize what you consider a community event to be. And check the list for allowable, unallowable, and I would assume that some of those items, like pamphlets or what have you, might fall under supplies or other. But again, I guess we just have to see what you're envisioning.
Okay, Nora did follow up with a bit of a description. Community event costs could include meal, raffle items, family activities such as a petting zoo.
Yeah, so I would again refer to the allowable, unallowable cost list to determine what we'll fund. There are some items that you listed that I believe are unallowable. So again, just take a look at our list. But a tribal police community relations event might be something that we will fund. It's just a question of how we fund it.
Okay, I have a follow-up question about the vehicle. So do you not have to bid out the vehicles?
So with anything that you're asking us So any equipment items that your department is for across the board, whatever you're asking us for, again, we want your department we want you, the department, to follow your own procurement policy. And if you don't have one, we recommend at least 2 bids. Basically, if this was your money, how would you spend it? So it is prudent to just shop around. Bids, are not necessarily required to be attached to the application, but we want you to do good diligence in terms of figuring out what would be the cost of a vehicle. So do some shopping around, and yes, if your department does have, and we want your department to follow your own procurement policy, so if that requires bids, please do so. But for application purposes, you just want to do a good faith effort to determine how much a patrol vehicle would cost or how much that uniform would cost. So just shop around and do a good estimate on how much these items will cost you. But in the event down the road, while we're reviewing your budget, if we need some supporting documentation, you would have that. But in general, the department should follow their own procurement policy on how much these particular items might cost you, and just do a good estimate on your budget worksheet.
Okay, I have another question. Can we charge less than our federally negotiated indirect cost rate in CTAS Purpose Area 1?
Yes, you can, but we have to have some sort of explanation as to why this is happening and that you are definitely approving of a lower rate.
Okay, we do have a few more minutes if there are any remaining questions. I want to make sure you're aware in the bottom left corner of your screen there is a survey that you can click on and take that survey regarding the